In this video, we're going deep into one of the greatest cask beers, a beer that reached number 3 in the top-selling cask beers in the UK in its heyday in the 90s. A cask beer with such delicate subtlety and golden creaminess that it became an icon, a golden beacon to ale drinkers in the 90s. Seminal advertising campaigns that are still quoted by those with long memories today. Yes, we're talking, of course, about Boddingtons, the cream of Manchester. But where has Boddingtons gone today? When was the last time that you actually saw Boddingtons on cask in your local pub? In this video, we'll be looking into the history of Boddingtons, we'll research the recipe and see how it's changed over the years, and if we can find one, we'll taste a can of Boddingtons as it is today. We'll bring in a Lancastrian beer expert to both sample that can and tell us what was good about Boddingtons back in the day. We'll get to the bottom of what on earth happened to Boddingtons to cause it to fall so dramatically from such highs. Then we're going to recreate the best historical recipe of Boddingtons right here in the Wheatlow Brewery, put it on cask and taste that to see if we can bring back alive this amazing beer that's been ruined and abandoned by the big business makers of Bud Light. Let's talk about the recipe. For this beer, there's information in my books. Go back to the early 90s, brew your own real ale at home, Graham Wheeler. And there's a recipe in here for Boddington's bitter. But it's pale malt and black malt, it says, that's all. And then quite a mixture of hops, Fuggles Goldings, Whitbread Goldings, Northern Brewer, Bramling Crossed and East Kent Goldings, all English hops, could well be right. However, the beer had already started to change by then. In fact, the earliest reference to people publishing things, for example, within camera saying that Boddingtons is changing and deteriorating, it was 1987. So I think we need to look a bit further back. So there's a beer writer called Ron Pattinson who's written extensively about this, and he's researched actual brewery records and published several recipes over several years based on those records. And the one that we're going to go for is the 1971 version of Boddingtons, because we think that is a snapshot of Boddingtons at its best, and it's got more traditional ingredients in it. So, how does that shape up in the recipe? Pale malt, 67%, and then it's got some lager malt in, which is to help lower the colour. Anecdotally, people say the colour of Boddingtons has got darker over the years, so we're going to use 11% lager malt to help lower that. And then quite a traditional ingredient, some acidulated malt, which means malt that's got a higher acid content in it, which means we don't have to add acid to the mash to bring the pH down. Then a bit of wheat malt to add to the head retention. Remember, Boddingtons, of course, is famous for its creamy white head, so we need to make sure we've got ingredients in there that will help support that. And similarly, we've got 4% of flaked maize or torrefied maize, which will add a subtle cornflakey flavour, a different kind of sweetness to the malt, and also keep it pale, and it'll also help with head retention, so that's a good addition. If you've been following that, you might realise it doesn't add up to 100%. That's because we've got 8% sugar, just invert sugar or dextrose, and we did and ah about whether to ditch the sugar and use 100% malt, but a lot of breweries did use sugar in those days, either for taste or cheapness, and what it'll do is it will lighten the body and it will 100% attenuate, i.e. the yeast will eat all that sugar, so it'll help with the dryness that we want to create. So we're going to keep that in at 8% and we'll add that in the boil. Hopping wise, we've simplified the hops, English hops, Fuggles to start with, 15 IBUs for an hour. And then in the last 10 minutes, we've got 14 IBUs of late hop East Kent Goldings. And also a very small dry hop, which is less than 0.5 gram per litre of East Kent Goldings, which we'll put in after fermentation, just to help with that florally note. Morning, it's brew day, and today we're going to try and brew the 1971 recipe for Boddingtons and recreate this iconic beer. So we've got the ingredients ready here. Yep, we'll start and get mashed in. Now, this is one of those sacks that's sewed, which for many years I could never open. But once you master it, it's the most satisfying thing ever. Oh, look at that. Strange how the least thing amuses me. So we just want 13 kilos or so of this. 13.6 litre source. And 2.3 of lager malt. What is the beer like? Or what was the beer like? What are we looking for? So this is Roger Prott's description from the early 90s. Complex floral hops, lemon and spice aromas. Flinty dryness in the mouth, long and hard finish with hop bitterness and tart fruit. And then he says, well attenuated, light golden bitter with complex hops and citric fruit character. So the important takes from that are complex floral lemon spice aroma. So that's coming from the English hops and also possibly a little bit from the yeast. The flinty dryness is really important. It's a big feature of Boddingtons. When we look at Ron Pattinson's records that he's published, the beer in 1971 had very high levels of attenuation. Now, what attenuation means is it's how much of the sugar contained in the wort the yeast can actually eat and turn into alcohol. The more it eats, then the drier the beer is, and the less it eats, the sweeter it is. And there's various things we can do to affect that, like mash temperature, but also, and the type of malts we use, of course, whether we can extract the sugars, but also the yeast. So I'll come on to that in a moment. Right, so we mashed in, just doing a bit of circulation, a bit of Vorlauf to make sure the temperature's stable at 66, which is what we're mashing at today. And now I'm going to add the water salts and check the pH. Oh, the water profile. The water in Manchester is soft, and many brewers in those days would Burtonize the water somewhat through brewing a bitter. So we have taken a view on the water that it will be a soft water with the addition of gypsum to kind of give it some Burtonization. So that would give it a 1.8 sulfite to chloride ratio. It's the same water we use for St. Austell Tribute. It's going to emphasize the hop enough so that you get it, but keep the beer rounded and smooth because it's quite soft. So I'll put that on the screen here, and you can follow that. We're using RO water and we're adding minerals to get to those numbers. Water salts going in. Okay, water salts are in, the temperature's just hit 66. So we're going to shut the lid, leave it to get on with its thing. Turn the recirculation Vorlauf off as well. Okay, back in an hour. Right, so the pH, we've added no acid, just the acidulated malt. The pH is actually 5.1. It's a touch too low. So I'm just going to put a little bit of sodium bicarbonate in to bring it back up. And you can see that fizzing as it reacts. Mix it in, and then we'll take another pH reading. There we go, 5.2 pH, at roughly 20 degrees. So I'm happy with that. Leave it to mash. So let's talk about the yeast. The yeast in this beer is very important. Boddingtons was bombed in the war by the Luftwaffe, and the brewery was largely destroyed and had to be rebuilt. And as part of that, they lost the yeast, which is, some say, the start of when Boddingtons changed. But it did have some positive effects. They rebuilt the brewery, and it was the most modern equipment at that time, which helped the brewery move on to better quality. It was one of the first breweries to have stainless steel vessels, for example. So this yeast, we're searching for a yeast that will give us the character that we need. It's a subtle beer, it's not malty, and it's not hoppy, really. A good portion of the character of the beer needs to come from the yeast. Now, Roger Protz in his description says it's very highly attenuated. Ron Pattinson says it's 90%-ish in the 70s, the attenuation levels. So we need a super duper yeast to do that. Now, this yeast, Omega Yeast Gulo, is such a yeast. I'll read out what it says. Expect orange marmalade and peach character with a clean but brute-like finish. Gulu was born at Omega Yeast as the mated offspring of Irish ale and French Saison yeast, and was chosen for exhibiting the best of the Irish strain's flavour while capturing the powerful attenuation of the French non-phenolic, aromatic, and a beast at devouring wort sugars. Think suitability for IPAs, stouts, bière de garde, etc. Right, so what that's saying is that you've got an ale yeast in there, but you've also got a Saison yeast that's been kind of denatured, desaisonized. So you're not getting the things that you might get with a Saison, like the pepperiness and the wild fruity stuff, but what you are getting is the property of a saison yeast that highly attenuates the beer. So it's talking about attenuation of 85 to 90%, and that is what's going to give us what Roger Protz describes as a flint-like dryness in the mouth. And that makes the beer really moorish, really drinkable. It does dry your mouth slightly when you drink it, and that if you've got a dry mouth, you simply have to drink more, don't you? So that's really key to getting that old Boddingtons effect. So we're really pleased. We've tried this yeast several times. Really pleased with how this performs at that task. So we're going to make a starter up of this and get it in the beer. Also, the monsters on the front with licking the cactus are pretty cool, and I think we might have to draw some inspiration from that for naming the beer later on. End of the mash. It's Vorlaufing at just over 74 degrees, and it's looking nice and clear. So we can start transferring that. Nice and steady. Right, we've got some hops to measure out. We need 139 grams of Fuggles. And that's the 39, so plus a full pack. That's going to go in, well, in fact, why not now? Let's put it in now. We're at 89 degrees, so first wort hops. What does it make a difference to the flavour? Possibly. But what it definitely does is it stops the wort boiling over. So there is the wort pre-yeast pitch. Just taking a sample to check the gravity. It's pretty clear, got a few bits and bobs in it. So I'm pleased with that. And taste, certainly taste the hoppiness, sweetness obviously because it's not fermented yet. So looking good. Right, we've finished the brew day. Boddingtons is in here. We've quite a good efficiency today, so it's really quite full. I'd say probably about 135 litres, so it's pretty cool, pretty good. And I've just remembered that I've got to put on a neoprene jacket like this, which I've just had delivered. Otherwise, when we cool the tanks, it dribbles condensation everywhere, and the chiller can keep up better if the tank's insulated. So I've just got to fiddle with that for a minute, put that on, and then we can add the yeast. Managed to get that on. I'll have to mute the sound for that bit, I think. So I've spilt quite a bit of glycol on the floor, but we can soon get that up. I haven't got any floor drains, so this wonderful machine is essential. So it's a little bit hot, it's 24 degrees, so I should have ran it a bit slower through the heat exchanger, but no problem. I'll just cool it with the glycol, won't take more than 20 minutes probably, and then add the yeast at 19. Okay, let's get the yeast in. So I've just checked the final gravity and it's 1038, which is a little bit high. Should be 1036. But what we could do is liquor it back, add some water. I've decided not to do that, so just label it up now. 1038, and also a reminder, add dry hop, because otherwise you can forget. Right, this is the Boddingtons. It's had the dry hop in for a couple of days, then we've cooled it for a day to 3 degrees, and it's not clear yet, but that's fine. That's pretty clear for this stage. We'll put it in the casks now and get it in the cellar with some brow salt in the casks, and it should be clear pretty soon. What is good is it tastes good. It tastes light, dry, it's got some bitterness there, and it's got that strange, distinctive Boddingtons taste that I just remember from the 90s, and it's kind of, well, Roger Protz describes it as flinty dryness. Maybe it's sulfuriness or something, but it's just a flavour that I've never experienced in anything except Boddington. So I'm pretty confident at this stage this is going to be great. But let's get it into the casks. We've washed these casks here. We need to get the keystones in first. So these have been sanitised. I'm going to do 2 big ones, 2 little ones. 2 nines, 2 pins, or 2 firkins, 2 pins, 2 nines, 2 4.5s. I've got this beaker here and the sanitizer and the syringe. I'm going to put my brow sol in here so we can add that sol. Is a kind of findings that we put into the casks. You can use gelatine, and traditionally you used isinglass, which is a fish swim bladder. But the brow sol is very effective and quick, and it doesn't have animals in, which I don't mind, but if any of your drinkers are vegetarian or vegan, then at least it doesn't alienate them. So you need 14 ml in the big ones, 10 and a 4. But there's residue of brow salt left in there. What we'll do as part of this process is we'll fill that with beer, and that'll just be a test of the findings. That's what it looks like now. see what it looks like in 20 minutes. We'll put it up here. Very excited about this beer. Of course, you may realise that I'm sporting a brand new Gulu t-shirt. Now, I'm going to name it Gulu. In fact, we brew it quite regularly. We call it Gulu. And Gulu is a little bit of a sort of friendly monster. And he's had his own t-shirts printed. So, I know that you're desperate for a frothing ale t-shirt. So have a look in the description below and you can see how to order your very own exclusive Wheatlow Brewery Gulu t-shirt. The thing with brewing is that sometimes you're just so excited about a beer and you're desperate for it to be ready, and it's very tempting to do something quicker in order to drink it quicker, but actually that normally delays you because the end product doesn't get ready as quickly. So we have been patient with this. We've dumped the yeast out and let it settle for several days before we dumped the yeast out. Cooled it to 14, added the hops. The hops, that's their ideal temperature because you don't get so much biotransformation, which is where some sort of obscure sugars in the hops might ferment with the yeast. So we got rid of most of the yeast by dumping the bottom of the cone, and we've added the hops. It's only a tiny addition on this actually. In fact, next time I might just add it as a leaf hop into the casks, which would save time in the tanks and possibly, you know, get more flavour as it was being there for forever. Anyway, we're taking our time and the beer has settled out quite nicely, cleaned up by sitting on its yeast for a while, and that will take things like the diacetyl out of the beer and other nasties that the yeast kicks off when it's fermenting. It will reabsorb when it's stopped fermenting, which is quite clever of it. And so being patient is very important as a brewer, and it isn't, I must admit, a quality that I have in the superabundance. So the way around that is to just brew constantly. So there's always something exciting around the corner. So whereas we can't drink this today because it's not quite ready, something that we did a few days ago might well be. So we're keeping the interest and the excitement that way, and it's stopping us pushing the beer too fast, and therefore we're getting better results because this is my little coping mechanism to apply patience to the production of beer. Just imagine how smart you'll look with one of these luxury t-shirts on. They are in limited supply, so it will be first come, first served. Handcrafted in Britain. Well, the printing bit at least. You must have to order a size above what you think you are, because I've had to have triple XL here. I can't understand that, but still. Look at it frothing out of the cask. And of course all that froth's actually protecting the beer inside because it's full of CO2. But with cask ales like this, we don't have to be absolutely, well, as you can see, meticulous about preventing oxygen ingress. There'll still be a little bit of fermentation in the cask. If you wanted to be really sure about that, you could add some sugar, but I've never found the need to. And remember our little sample of Gulu with the brow sol in? This is what it looks like 20 minutes later, so still a way to go, but it just shows you how effective it is. And can clear a cask in 24 hours. That's the end of part 1 of this video. Join us in part 2 when we pour a pint from a can of Boddingtons compared to our cask version, and Matt joins me, who's a Lancastrian, and we share our thoughts on what Boddingtons used to be, what it's become now, and how our beer compares to the canned version. Tune in to episode 2 to find out if we could recreate the golden colour of Boddingtons and the famous creamy white cream of Manchester head on the beer. Watch us mull our way through a can of Boddingtons and find out what went wrong with it before we switch to a creamflow version which has been kegged and nitrogenated in the brewery to try a third version of this beer. We'll compare keg and cask versions, note the differences, so join us in part 2 for a frothing ale. Cheers.